For the longest time, I was, a slave to one style, and that was Tang Soo Do. And it was probably due to the fact that I was really close with my Master Yun Tak Bong, and he passed away in the early 90s. And I had this, sense of obligation to pass on everything he knew, and I tried to do it by teaching exactly the way that I was taught. And I did this for, holy smokes, man, over 30 years. Even though I learned other styles, and I would come across things that, were done in other styles that were maybe more efficient than the way I was taught, or better than the way I was taught, or there were techniques that Tang Soo Do did not cover, situations that it didn't cover, that like ground fighting or wrist locks or throws, and I tried to mix it, but I always felt like I was a failure, or I was dishonoring him in some way. So up until like recently, then I finally, through wisdom and age, being 54 this year, I realized that it's supposed to be my Tang Soo Do. Yes, he taught me, and that's where it lies, but it is evolved. His Tang Soo Do has evolved with me, just like it has evolved with every other student that he taught. So now going forward in my training, I'm starting to research and dig and look back to the origins of karate and Tang Soo Do, and go back to the Okinawan masters. And when I started digging and researching, I started to see pictures of like Gichin Funakoshi and Yamaguchi, all these old Okinawan masters, old Japanese masters. And when I was looking at the pictures, and I had seen some of them before when I was younger, I noticed one thing, and all their stances were higher, closer together. They weren't the really deep stances that you see today in tournament kata competition, those types of things. And even coming up all from the time I was young, my stances, I always tried to go low, because to me it appeared that it was more powerful, it was more elegant. And I just kind of tossed it up to that, these guys were old, they couldn't get that low, that's why they were standing so high, or their stances were so high and narrow. And being older now, I realized that that wasn't the case at all. Stances to me, Tang Soo Do and some of the other styles have gone way too far. I've seen a lot of stance styles where you go from the horse stance, and then you got the front stance, and then you've got a back stance, and then this is a stance, and then this is a stance, and every little movement in between, every little transition is a different stance, and you've got like 10, 15 different stances you gotta learn. That's ridiculous. I personally go with 3 stances: front stance, horse stance, back stance, or cat stance, period. That's it. And I train in them only to strengthen my legs, that kind of thing. I'll stand in a horse stance or in a front stance and do some different techniques. I'll stand in a back stance and practice some kicking techniques. But stances are not truly stances. To me, I use the word stances because there's no, for lack of a better term, you don't fight in them. They're not permanent. They're not stationary. A stance is something that, like, I take a stance. I'm rigid. I'm putting my foot down and I'm taking a stance, or my stance on something. This is where I stand. That's not the case. Stances in martial arts are transition movements. You don't stand in them to fight. You flow in and out of them depending on the situation. You might be defending yourself and you get into a position where you step behind somebody and you throw them over your hip. Well, if I'm standing here and I stand behind, I'm in a horse stance. Once I throw him, I'm in a front stance. You transition in and out of them. They're not stationary movements. They're not stationary things that, it's not like a fighting stance where you're standing in ready and you're fighting out of this. I hope this makes sense, but it's just something that I came across and I've been going on. And in my own stance training, going through the forums, I realized that these older masters, it wasn't because they were old. It's because a narrower and higher stance is more mobile, it's more efficient, better for self-defense, which is what the core of their training was. It wasn't for sport, it wasn't for trophies, it wasn't to look good, it was for effectiveness. And the higher the stance, the more mobile you are. If you're in a really low horse stance with your legs almost parallel, you're not very mobile at all. So realizing this and getting older now and really owning my way of doing Tang Soo Do now, I've raised my stances. And who knows, you know, I mean, it's also easier on the knees, because when you're in, I'm apologize for the noise, but they're building like 3-4 houses over here. When you're training and you're in these low stances, moving around puts a lot of stress on the knees. And maybe if I would have realized this, instead of thinking it was just because they were old, if I would have realized that it was actually better for self-defense, which has been my focus all along, and it was more mobile, and that it was actually the original way that it was done before it, you know, stances dropped for competition, kicks went higher for competition in the early 1900s, maybe my knees wouldn't be as bad as they are now. Who knows? But I just kind of want to put this out there and see what you guys think. Are your stances, do you practice the really low stances? And if so, why? Is it because you compete in forums, or it's because it's the way you were taught? Let me know, because put it in the comments below. Because for me, I've evolved and kind of come full circle where I'm actually looking at past masters like way back to move forward in my own journey. And you know, I'm a big proponent of not looking backwards, not looking to the past. The past is the past, it's dead. You need to move forward. You know, that's why the rear view mirror in your car is so small compared to the windshield, because you're supposed to spend most of your time looking forward, not back. You got to know where you came from and stuff like this. When it comes to the martial arts, you should know where you came from, but you shouldn't just look at it without understanding it. And it took me a long time to kind of grasp what the fact that styles don't mean anything. It's my way of defending myself, my way of performing Tang Soo Do in karate and all the martial arts that I've learned, and putting my own way of doing things together. So that's that. Just want to kind of put that out there. Let me know what you think. Put a comment below. Until next time, train hard, never quit, stay healthy, and stay safe in this COVID-19 BS. Good luck, and we'll talk to you next video.